Welcome to the Shift Happens podcast, where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the future of work. Today's guest is Bud Caddell, founder of NOBL. Bud works with large, complex organizations to help them navigate change by making decision-making, incentives, and unspoken rules explicit, especially as AI begins to reshape how work flows across teams. In this episode, we move past AI hype to discuss why treating AI as a tech or digital initiative misses the point, how misaligned incentives slow execution, and why the most effective AI strategies start with clarity, honesty, and fixing the work people struggle with every day. Let's get started.
Shift Happens podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another awesome episode of Shift Happens. We're so excited today to have Bud joining us, and we're going to talk a lot about rules to make AI work. Well, Bud, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we kick off Shift Happens asking our guests what their soundtrack of Shift is. Essentially, which song best describes change or transformation to you, and why?
As someone who loves music and plays it poorly, I'm very much obsessed over this question. So thanks for sending that over. That was a fun evening going through my Spotify playlist. And I picked Alan Toussaint's Yes We Can for a bunch of reasons. Like, one, you got to move your body, and nothing does that more like New Orleans R&B. And then, the song is kind of all about belief in change, I think, is like the thing that, I try to call people back to, which is the hardest thing. We live in very skeptical and cynical times right now, and it's so easy to kind of throw your hands up and say, this place will never change. And that becomes a self-reinforcing belief system. So I think you have to have belief. I think you have to have a good beat. And that's a great song to have both.
I love that, right? So when I think I heard it once a long time ago, so I had to listen to it again. On one hand, there's that juxtaposition of change is constant. We got to keep moving, like you said. But at the same time, human nature, I don't want to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the song is so positive that, look, it's you and me, buddy. We can make this happen. And, we got to iron out the problems, iron out our quarrels, but we just got to make it work. We got to be kind to each other. So really love it.
Yeah. And I don't know, the thing that I focus on a lot now is this idea of like, yes, we live in truly unprecedented times. And I'm so tired of saying that like, you call it a polycrisis, you call it, there's so many different words now to describe this kind of era that we live in. And I think that most people are struggling with it, not just because of the rate of change, but because of like what's lacking underneath it. Like, so many of us don't feel like we have solid ground to stand on, that like our own opinions about our neighbors and one another has changed so dramatically in that time that like, I think we could weather a lot of change if we had some more basic conditions in place and some stability, right? I think a lot of change resistance comes from not feeling like you have that stability underneath it.
You've been in this business, talk about change, right? So in your organization, you help companies not only weather the change, but really set that foundation, set the stage as you call change makers. So let's talk about the topic du jour, right? AI. It's just moving and changing every day. So what's your point of view for AI, and how are you helping an organization go through this change and benefit from it?
I was a software developer first, and I was a pretty bad one. So like all bad software developers, I became a consultant. And I did so around the time of like the first digital disruption, right? And so I'm of that age now where you're like seeing the story again, and you're seeing the same things we got wrong the first go around happen again. And what I mean by that is like when digital came along, everyone saw it as like, it's a technology problem, right? And like, let's throw it at a chief technologist or a chief digital officer, not understanding that like it was about to be a horizontal disruption that was going to change everyone's life inside the organization and have some kind of impact. And I see AI being treated the same way, which is like, I'm seeing a lot of chief AI officers. I'm seeing a lot of like the mandates for AI transformation just being handed over to the CTO versus thinking about like, okay, this is, and I think the difference too between digital and AI is it's happening so fast, right? Like if you think about like where the dot-com era started in the 90s and sort of like where we ended up, we had 10 or 15 years to respond as a market. We're seeing AI capability change week to week, and really having an impact. And I think the more that companies treat it as this like vertical disruption of just like, oh, hand it to tech or tech will solve it, or it's just going to affect for now, like, our customer chatbot on the website, and not thinking about like how it's literally going to change like every single thing that you're able to do as an organization is just one of those things I want to be really loud about of like, let's at least not make that same mistake again.
So when you bring that up to customers, especially the first time you talk to them about it, when they engage you, what's a typical, I guess, reaction? Is it like, oh, we never thought about it that way? Oh, or really? Or they buy in right away to that line of thinking?
I think it's like it's an easy thing to nod your head at, but again, it's really hard to operationalize, which is why, things have always fallen into single silos, because that's like the safest way to respond to it. Everyone in an organization, you want to say, hey, this is now your role and responsibility, and I can go back to my day to day. And like, I already have a mountain of problems to deal with. So I don't know what to do about this like existential threat that you just handed me. So I'm going to go back to like solving supply chain problems and not really thinking long term about this. And that's just human nature. So I think, again, most of our clients nod at first, but then we really have to help them think through like, no, really, how are we going to change how your organization behaves together? We got to start rethinking what silos mean inside the company, because it's not just about like information not moving, it's process, it's people, it's rules inside the organization and things like that. So it takes some repeated hammering, let's say it that way.
Do you think, as you were saying that, one thing I was thinking about, change management has always been a struggle for organizations, in part because of what you both are mentioning, that just change is hard, and the adoption of whether it's a new technology or even a new working process requires an effort that people communicate differently through that change and that process. So when we consider what AI is bringing into the workplace, and we think about, let's say, the redesign of a workflow, or the decision paths that maybe the AI agent has to take, what struggle or hurdles do you think we will see, or are you guys seeing in the work you're doing with your clients, where AI can act on clear signals rather than that messy, communication or fuzzy communication that humans tend to have through these changes?
Yeah, I think white collar work, and that's like most of the work I do is in headquarters of these big public Fortune 500 companies. Like they are allergic to strict rules, right? Like most leaders and most teams want to operate sort of around the edges of those rules. And what we're finding, right, is AI forces you to codify the rules of how work gets done, how decisions get made. And there's this fuzziness that they've always pushed hard against. One of our clients, we were working with them, in a very specific use case around like, okay, we now have a very intelligent algorithm that can look at our supply chain, that can look at like profit margin on specific products, that can look at consumer segments, so that like we can, ideally give you the best product recommendation at any time that will maximize like your loyalty with us and our profit margin. But when we sat down, the product team, whose job it was basically to make sure that like new products were a hit, but they didn't break the supply chain. We sat down the tech team, whose job it was like they were literally incentivized by how much revenue they could create through an app. And then we had a marketing team sit down who was thinking long term about like brand over time and not just sale overnight. What we realized is like everyone's incentives were like mostly pointing against each other. And none of these choices could be made by any single individual. And there were just it took multiple attempts to even get people in the room and be honest about like what they thought the rules were, because usually they're like political, like organizations run on politics. We should just be really clear about that. And a lot of leaders like grow their teams and build their own influence in organizations by kind of like playing in those fuzzy spaces and getting something done that looks great for them. And again, I don't consider it a negative thing. It's just human nature inside organizations. But when we force this team or this set of teams to the table. It took like 3 or 4 attempts to really get their views open and on the table. And then we also had to force the decision of like, well, what is this company? Like, what are we trying to do right now? What is like the heart of our company strategy? And it called up, like, we are more of a marketing-led company at this moment than we are a product-led company or even a technology-led company. So at the end of the day, when there's a tie, we need to start thinking about like how marketing wins that tie, and what products to really recommend to users at that moment. But that was interesting because it was extremely hard to get to that moment, with those teams. But when that was finally said, I could feel in the room this weight lift off of people of like, yeah, that is, that is sort of the rules we operate under. And it's like, we've never quite said it out loud and been that explicit about it. But now that we can start to codify it, we can start making decisions and we're all not as stuck as we were 10 minutes ago.
Do you think that it's so true? And in fact, a lot of the work that we do also in our day job, Dux and I work extensively with a marketing program that oftentimes alignment is the most crucial part for us to be able to execute. Do you find that we now are at a place, but where there could be a set of explicit rules that get established to first create the alignment and give you the starting point to deploy AI into, let's say, a core process or part of a change management motion?
I think so. And the way that we have approached it before, and again, we are all at the very beginning of this. So like these are the best practices that we've landed on with, a handful of clients through, a dozen or so engagements, but everyone should be experimenting in different ways. But the way that we've decided is that like we tend to pick a core process inside the organization, so that you're not like making one team hyper efficient and that's just creating like bottlenecks and chaos in the organization. So pick something like the go to market process. So like our most teams in some way play some role. It's sort of the like largest river that everyone's tributaries feed into. First, start by just like mapping how it works today, right? Like, show me all the places where decisions are made and where decisions are messy. Show me what, like, in general, what the inputs are for that process at different times. Then from team to team, you can have conversations around like, okay, where are we just going to seek efficiency gains? Like, where are there actually AI tools right now that can like make your life easier? Where's all the manual work? I just like to start with like, let's get all the manual work out as much as we possibly can. The stuff that just like people are like up late doing data entry. You're like, okay, first of all, I think like AI is triggering everyone's like fears right now, as it rightly should, because the entire AI market is like, it's pitting humans against software, which I think is like, a very foolish decision in terms of how we market these products and how we think about them. So like, let's start solving people's pain points first. And then once we can see where those decision points are along the process, let's start codifying some like extremely simple rules for AI to potentially like eat into there and make decisions for teams and speed up decision making. But, we are just so far away from, the theoretical idea of this like always like satisfying efficiency maximizing algorithm that can run your company. And I think that's a good thing because like we don't even know, to your point about alignment, we don't even know how our organizations are aligned. We haven't even said it explicitly. So the idea that you would just like turn over your organization to a system like that could really lead to unintended consequences.
There's a concept you just talked about. So it's interesting. If you say that, if you look at the word replace, it has a negative connotation versus if you use a word like progress. If you say AI is to help us make progress or advance progress in this area, you tend to have a more positive outlook in what it can do to enable, where replace could be fear, as you mentioned, and perhaps that's the challenge now, humans against software. If we think about that and we say, okay, those are identity statements, right? Are there, in your practice, have you and the team used identity statements to influence with a positive view that AI, there are trade-offs that AI can offer the business, but at the end of the day, they're all positive outcomes, outcomes that lead to progress?
Yeah, like I think about a client we're working with right now, and before AI became the most important thing for the CEO to talk about so shareholders could hear them, they were offshoring a lot of their work, to India, to places in South America. And they were triggering the exact same fears inside the company. And so in some ways, we talk about the fact that like this is a version of offshoring that we should just be really honest about. I'm more at the place of like, I wish businesses would just be more honest about the decisions that they're making, because every time that we interview, like we go into an organization and we try to get the pulse of like, how are people feeling right now? And every single time that there is this like cosmetic layer attached to like a layoff or a reorg, like people know it, people can smell it from miles away. I mean, we've done tons of research that show that like we just live in really skeptical times. Like people are just primed to assume there's a motive, there's like a darker motive behind most things that like executives do. And anytime they catch a whiff of it based on like, oh, like we're just the latest trend has been like we're delayering so that we can move faster as an organization. It's like everyone knows that like shareholders are like really fixated on margin control right now. And that's what a lot of companies are doing. And a lot of companies like overhired after COVID or during COVID and are having to make like employees aren't stupid. And so I'm kind of a bad comms advisor in a lot of ways, because I'm like instead of saying like, well, the nicer way to say it is, I'm usually like, let's be honest and treat them like adults, and let employees know like what's happening now. But this also, I mean, not to get too political, but this also all requires like a political machinery that's also thinking about long-term consequences. Like businesses weren't always supposed to think about like, how am I growing this quarter? What's it look like, year over year? They're not like, that is not the incentive for individual organizations to be thinking about like what's going to happen to the entire labor market if this trend keeps continuing. And so like I think executives are playing the role that they were designed for. And I wish that they could just be more direct and more honest.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a very good point, right? Obviously, especially for a profit organization, they think about, how do you maximize value for shareholders? And a technology like this can certainly do that. In a lot of engagements you're in and customers you're in, what are those typical metrics where customers use or you help put together so that they just won't be optimizing for or hung up on a single metric, and almost always that's around margins, right?
Yeah. Like sometimes, so we use a bit of a Mad Lib. And again, like for us, we're just trying to get them down to like a set of simple rules to begin with and then add complication over time. So we put them through this kind of template, which is like blank, even at the cost of blank, up until blank. And like an example of that is like revenue growth, even at the cost of profit margin, up until our profit margin starts to hit like 15% or something like that. Like, and what that forces you as an organization, it forces you to just name the trade-offs, right? Like you could be in hyper growth mode. So you're like, revenue. We'll think about like margin control later, but also understand like what's the reality of like when things actually start to look like they're in the red line, right? Like what does critical look like? And for most of these companies, like we're really trying to distill sort of like the near term market strategy, like 6 months down to like 3 to 5 of these rules that they can communicate pretty clearly. And employees and especially like middle managers can make decisions without having to escalate everything back up to the C-suite. So they're like, okay, I basically understand what the heuristics are right now. That helps me make this decision. It helps me also like, if I'm in a debate with a peer on another part of the business, like we can look to things that help us make decisions. That's where we start. And then, we add a lot of nuance and complication on top of that. So then you might be like, that's true for this product line, but not that product line. Or that's true for this emerging business that we're launching in a new market, but not true for another. Yeah.
So when you do that, right? So there's a certain threshold. How do you help leaders set the framework and the guardrails so everything's balanced? Like they don't go off deep end where they're redlining and they still keep pushing, right? So this way they balance not just shareholder value, but customer experience, employee experience, and profitability, especially when they roll out AI solutions.
Yeah, we'll do some exercises with them. Like one is just a simple premortem of like, okay, let's assume that these rules work and they work wildly well. What are the unintended consequences we could imagine as a result of this? And then let's pick the top 3 that we're going to watch most closely and like literally assign someone to watch it. So So it could be like customer churn could be something that could potentially happen because we're only focused on near-term revenue growth. So like ducks for right now, for the next 3 months, I want you to just look at customer churn and come like every couple of weeks report back to us what customer churn is looking like. So we know if we're getting close to that red line. That's just one way that we do it and try to like, you can't predict every situation. That's not the goal of a premortem. It's really to build the like communication muscle to be able to say like, hey, I'm starting to see something like a weak signal we should pay more attention to.
There's one thing that I was thinking about is the dysfunction that exists when organizations are trying to design workflows. Oftentimes, are dependent on approval workflows and some decision tree. Does the design of an AI-enabled workflow remove all of that because it's more, binary, right? I'm just curious if
Ollie,
if
that
you're
would be
seeing that or
lovely.
what's
That would
that?
be lovely, but I haven't. No, because I think that like the more like the era that we live in, right? So it's 2026. Even the people who are like the most excited about AI still want to see their human agency flex like with it. So I think that like what we've seen is the more that AI chews up the entire real estate of decision making and creativity, the more we've seen teams push back. Um, and so I like and work around the system in really funny ways. Like the kind of strange behavior you watch where people like will find ways to break the system or stop it from pushing things through approval and things like that's the world we live in right now. And again, like I think a lot of it is caused by this like adversarial nature of how we pitch these systems. But for us, no, I think that we still look at like, okay, where's the human in the process, our human in the loop? How are we designing those interventions? What's the moment where like the manager like will review for, and what are they reviewing for? Is it like for craft, right? Like I want to make sure that the quality of this, I think for a lot of our clients, like that's a big need right now. Or it's data accuracy. We'll hear that from tech teams. Like, let's make sure that the data that went into the system is accurate. Or there could be like a finance component of like, sure, this is great decisions that are coming out of it, but what's the impact on the business long term? Like the example, so I try to eat our own dog food at my company NOBL, and like the thing that we started about a year ago, we call it driverless steering. And we feed all of our financial info and some of our engagement data into a tool. And all that tool does is like it makes proposals that we have to review as a leadership team. And like, when you run a small business like ours, there's like only a handful of levers, right? It's like hire, fire, when do we invest in marketing, things like that. But basically what that system does is it forces us to review a formal proposal. It'll say like, hey, I'm looking at like allocation and run rate right now. You could afford to hire 2 more heads. That's the proposal. You have to go to beta as a team. Like, I think that that is probably where we're going to see these systems pivot to, instead of like there's some things that like, like in call centers, right? AI can make a lot of choices for you and solve a lot of problems. But when it comes to like the decision-making and governance side, I think it's more like AI, it's a little bit like being clippy of like popping into whatever's happening right now and saying like, hey, based on what I'm seeing, I propose you should do blank, you react as a human team now to that proposal.
Yeah. Are you guys doing anything in experimentation to help organizations either through workshops or other formats, work out some of these differences and get to a place where they establish the rules that help them deploy?
Yeah, that's mostly what we do. And again, like a year ago, a lot of those workshops were even just like, what are you bringing to the AI conversation? Like, where are you starting from? Like, do you see this as like a net positive for society? Do you see it as a net negative? Like, what are your fears? What are your concerns? Like, that was and like, how are we going to adopt it as a tool? Is this going to be the sort of thing where we want to start 1,000 fires and let teams run and experiment and then we pull them together? Or do we want to set up like a centralized governance process to like pick bets and things like that? That was a lot of our workshops like a year ago. Now they're like what I talked about with that like tech team, marketing team, and product team, where it's like, okay, let's just bring those groups to the table, force conversations into the open, or do that process mapping that we talked about.
What are the typical organizations you work with, and why do they engage you and your organization?
I mean, that's a really fair question for them. I mean, we've been in business now for about almost 12 years, and there's no single specific industry like focus that we've had. Because I think at the end of the day, like we solve people problems and people at scale. So most of our clients are like public companies, incredibly complicated. A lot of them are in some kind of turnaround where it's not just, and that problem isn't just like, "Hey, we have a new strategy or need a new strategy." It's like, we need a lot of people in a very short time span to get on board with this new strategy and start changing their behaviors. And so we've also built like a nice little business that it comes off the back of like 3 times a month, I get a call saying, "Hey, McKinsey or BCG just dropped off this 200 slide deck. No one here knows what to do with it, and we're already 8 months behind on the roadmap. What do we do?" And that's sort of what I think we're good at, is like distilling these like very lofty strategies into observable behaviors. Like, what are people going to change with like what they do with their hands at work to make this new strategy effective in the market, or to test it really? Because all these strategies are just guesses. Uh, and then we try to pull people together as fast as we can to get those off the ground.
So you don't just leave the strategic recommendations, but you want to make sure that these things get executed, enforced, and hopefully operationalized too, right?
Yeah, I mean, most turnarounds are 3 to 5 years. And so our relationships with our clients are like 8 months at a minimum, and they could be like up to 24 months. And it looks like we're like living before COVID, like we lived inside all of our clients. Like part of our deal was like we would get space. We got to do fun work at a Hollywood studio, and I had like a space. I had an office on the lot, which was like the coolest thing. Where I'm like, "Hey, look who's walking outside." Um, and that's just like the implementation side of it just requires that. I think the thing that I wish clients understood a bit more is they've always separated the like design of the strategy with the implementation. And for us, it's like, no, they're the same thing. Because like you can sit and design the strategy all you want, but it won't survive contact with like real employees and real customers. Like all of those hypotheses underneath it need to be tested as fast as you can. And you need to respond really quickly when they don't seem to work and try new things. And so a lot of our work is like, I don't really want to spend a ton of like, most of our clients know where they need to go in terms of strategy. It's like, oh, we have to get faster, or we need to focus on this. Like we need to like move past our mature products and open up new spaces. And so for us, it's like, great, you have a compass point. Let's go figure out all the different behaviors and processes inside the company that like need to change first to make that possible.
So along that lines, right? So a lot of your customers you work with today, certainly AI is top of mind. What are some of the most common things that in the end they would leverage AI for and do it effectively?
Ooh, that's such a really good question. And because we work in so many different industries, it's hard. It's kind of hard to think about that. But I mean, they're all like all the clients I can think of right now are kind of stuck in this chasm between pilot and scale. Um, and it could be as simple as like, hey, we turned Copilot on for everyone, and we have no idea what to do next. Or like we have no idea if it's even benefiting the teams that are using it, or if they're using it. And they're not quite getting to a scale yet. So that's why again I move past the like single team and tools. There's just so many tools now, and that's great. We live in this like era of proliferated tools, and there's like every single time you scan, like I work with a client and I'll look at a team like, okay, they're the team who looks for like new fabrics for clothing. I'm like, oh my God, there's like 6 new startups that will help you think about that and like visualize what a product line might look like in a completely new product fabric. But again, I go like, let's start with the shared stream that they all like put effort into, whether that's like go to market or launching new campaigns or things like that they all sort of touch. That's where I'm more focused on right now, because again, like I worked in the software world, so I know what it's like when you like can suddenly make one team way more efficient, but then it slows everybody else down and you don't know what to do. And I think that's happening in a lot of companies. Like everyone's becoming a feature factory because you're like, oh, we can make one team hyper efficient, and it's creating this glut and this backlog in the rest of the company. And we're trying to keep up with like what that list of projects is and trying to be strategic at the same time. And it's very
Yeah.
difficult.
There's it feels like a lot of what you're doing too is removing the noise. There's just so much noise that's preventing organizations from moving into more deployments that truly can scale.
Yeah. And It's really difficult. I mean, again, like this is a space that's changing day to day. Um, the message that CEOs are getting right now is like, if you put AI in a press release, your stock jumps 10%. Like that's documented. That's one of those effects.
Well, these
Uh,
days it goes down.
And so like, and a lot of CEOs are just like, where are we on AI? And, issuing, like we went from CEOs being scared of AI to suddenly mandating like everyone must use some kind of AI tool. And I expect to see a 20% productivity gain. Magic. And there's like a real lack of knowledge there in terms of like how it can actually impact the team. And then everyone else is just in their silo being like, oh, I think I could use it in this way, but also like, what does it mean for my job? And so it's just, yeah, there's so much noise to your point, Mario.
Boy, we can keep going on and on. It's such a rich conversation, but we want to be respectful of your time. So before we wrap up, for our listeners, I'm sure all of them or a lot of them already deployed AI. What are the 1-2 most important steps they need to really consider doing first? And if they haven't done it, they should, which would benefit them and their organization.
Yeah. So like I said, I like the very first thing I like to do is just like go hunt down all the work in the company that is like causing, people's eyes to bleed and their heads to just like, break all the time. Like, and again, like I am working with a client right now and people there have a lot of skepticism and fear around AI. And I'm like, we just need to show that it can show up and actually make your life easier. Before we get into like all the more advanced use cases, like the fact that we are throwing so many human bodies at so many broken systems right now, like let's go solve that problem first. And then again, I go look for, so that's it. Like literally we built a little team to just go find manual work. And it was like someone from tech, someone from like a process design background. And then like had a representative from each team in the building just go like, let's go hunt for those pains and go solve those first. And that's its own work stream. And then, yeah, we picked like 1 or 2 core processes to like find and like not just find where we put AI to make this process better, but also like what's dumb about, like if we were to start the company tomorrow, what would we change about this process? Like where are the old steps that we can get rid of and we can still bring AI in to make things better? But like I just think that like, you're cleaning out your house. Like AI is a good excuse to like dump your closet out and make a lot of better decisions in the organization already and simplify things. And like AI can just play one role in that.
Awesome. Well, Bud, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and hopefully we'll have you back in another episode.
Yeah, I'd love to. Great questions. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you, Bud.
That was Bud Caddell on why AI is less about automation and more about organizational clarity. What ultimately determines impact isn't the AI itself, but how clearly an organization defines priorities and decision boundaries. Bud notes that removing manual friction and using AI as a decision support rather than a substitute for judgment enables real movement beyond experimentation. Until the next time.
Shift Happens Podcast.